You're listening to an exclusive production from Valio, The Possession Trap, When Control Becomes Obsession. Chapter 1. The Allure of Possession, Awareness Before Freedom. Control never announces itself with a roar. It begins with a whisper, soft, seductive, and deceptively warm. It tells you that holding on is love, that closeness means safety, that if you can just keep them near, you will never be left behind. It wraps itself in tenderness, in loyalty, in devotion. You believe it because it feels true. Because beneath the desire to protect or be protected lies something deeper. A hunger to merge so completely that separation feels like death. That hunger is where possession begins. It does not arrive with chains. It arrives with promises. Promises of forever. Promises of safety. Promises that if you give enough, stay enough, love enough, no one will leave. You don't notice the shift, not at first. The grip begins so gently that it almost feels like being held. But over time, what felt like comfort starts to feel like confinement. The allure of possession is born from fear disguised as care. You call it love, but it is often the terror of losing what gives you meaning. That terror breeds control, the quiet need to manage, to contain, to predict. It becomes the unspoken rule that intimacy must not change, that love must not drift, that others must remain exactly as they are in the moment you felt most secure. Possession feels powerful, but it is rooted in weakness, the kind we rarely admit. It hides under devotion, under loyalty, under self-sacrifice. It says, "I'm doing this because I care." But beneath that noble surface is a quieter truth. I'm doing this because I'm afraid. The line between care and control is almost invisible. You only notice it when it's already been crossed. There is a part of you that wants to love without fear, to let others move freely, to trust that what is real cannot be taken. But another part, darker and more primal, clings to what it loves as if release equals annihilation. That part believes that losing control means losing identity. It doesn't know how to exist without possession, because possession feels like proof of importance. When someone becomes your world, you stop seeing them as a person with their own orbit. You see them as the anchor that keeps you from drifting into emptiness. You mistake their presence for stability. You start to think that if they pull away, you will unravel. So you watch, monitor, adjust, anticipate. You convince yourself it's love, but what you're really seeking is security, control dressed in the language of devotion. And it feels good. Possession feels intoxicating. It gives a sense of direction, of purpose. You become the protector, the one who knows what's best, the one who ensures that nothing falls apart. It becomes an addiction not to the person, but to the power of influence, the illusion that you can shape another's heart to fit your fears. But every form of possession carries a cost. When you control, you also cage yourself. The energy you invest in managing another's movements binds you tighter than them. You become trapped inside the very walls you built to feel safe. You may think the need to possess is only about others, lovers, friends, partners, but it reaches deeper. It can infect every aspect of life. You try to possess time, outcomes, reputations, even your own emotions. You tell yourself, I can handle it. I just need things to go a certain way. But every attempt to control life only deepens the anxiety that something might slip away. Control feeds on uncertainty. The more unpredictable life becomes, the stronger your desire to hold it still. Yet life refuses to be still. It moves, it shifts, it transforms. The harder you grasp, the more it writhes out of your hands. And when it does, you feel betrayed not by others but by reality itself. Possession is not just a behavior, it's an identity. It gives structure to fear. It allows you to say, I am the one who holds it all together, but that identity crumbles when you face the truth. Control cannot prevent loss. Possession cannot guarantee loyalty. Love cannot be secured through dominance. You can demand presence but not devotion. You can trap a body but not a soul. There is a strange pleasure in control, a dark satisfaction in knowing that you have influence over someone's choices, that your emotions can shape theirs. It feels like power, but that power is fragile. It depends on constant validation, constant proximity. You cannot rest. You must always check, always confirm, always make sure you still matter. Soon, you are not protecting love, you are defending territory. The person becomes a possession, an extension of your identity. You measure your worth by their obedience, their availability, their alignment with your expectations. You tell yourself, I only want what's best for them. But underneath that lies a quieter voice whispering, I want to be indispensable. Possession thrives where self-worth is unstable. When you don't fully trust your own value, you cling to external proof. Someone's loyalty, someone's dependence, someone's need for you. That proof becomes addictive, and like all addictions, it demands more over time. What began as affection turns into vigilance. You begin to anticipate rejection before it happens, to control behavior before it threatens you. And in doing so, you unknowingly become what you feared most, the source of suffocation. Possession is not always loud. It is not always toxic at first glance. Sometimes it wears a mask of tenderness. It looks like caring where someone goes, what they feel, who they speak to. It looks like wanting to know everything, to be involved, to share every moment. It feels intimate until it becomes invasive. Soon, boundaries blur. Privacy feels like distance. Independence feels like betrayal. The idea of letting go feels unbearable. But possession is never satisfied. It keeps demanding more proof, more closeness, more control. It whispers that if you could just tighten the hold, the fear will fade. But the opposite happens. The more you control, the more you fear losing control. You begin to live in defense. Every silence feels suspicious. Every change feels threatening. You stop connecting. You start guarding. And the irony is that possession destroys the very thing it tries to protect: love. Love cannot survive where fear dictates its terms. Love breathes in openness, in choice, in surrender. When you take away those things, you don't preserve love. You preserve dependence. Dependence is not devotion. It is imprisonment disguised as intimacy. There comes a moment when you must face the truth. What you hold too tightly begins to decay. Every attempt to trap love kills a part of it. What once felt alive becomes stale, predictable, heavy. You feel it too, the exhaustion of being the gatekeeper, the fear of losing control, the endless vigilance that leaves you drained. And then comes the realization: control was never safety. It was distraction. It gave you something to focus on so you didn't have to face the void inside. The void where uncertainty, vulnerability, and loss live. You thought you were avoiding pain. You were only delaying it. True power does not come from possession. It comes from presence, the ability to love without needing to own, the courage to stay open even when you cannot predict the outcome, the strength to let someone walk their path without collapsing into fear. But reaching that point requires honesty, the kind that cuts through illusion. You must admit that part of you enjoys control. You must acknowledge that it gives you identity. You must see the shadow for what it is, not to condemn it, but to understand it. Because understanding is the first step toward liberation. Possession is born from the illusion that control equals connection. But real connection thrives only in freedom. It cannot be forced or maintained through fear. It must be chosen moment by moment. To love without possession is to accept impermanence. It is to say, I will love you even if you change. I will stay present even when I cannot predict where we are going. It is to surrender not in weakness but in trust. That trust is not blind. It is grounded in strength, the kind that comes from knowing your worth does not depend on what you control. When you release the need to possess, you begin to feel a different kind of intimacy, one that breathes, one that evolves, one that reflects mutual respect rather than dependency. You discover that letting go does not mean losing. It means allowing what is real to reveal itself. The allure of possession is powerful because it offers the illusion of certainty in a world built on change. It promises that if you can just hold tightly enough, you will never be abandoned. But life does not honor force. It honors flow. To move beyond possession, you must confront the fear of loss directly. Feel it, face it. Let it tear through the illusions that kept you safe. Only then can love exist in its purest form, not as a cage but as a shared freedom. Freedom that breathes trust into connection. freedom that allows love to expand instead of contract, freedom that teaches you that control is not the path to security but the barrier to it. So when you feel the pull to possess, pause, ask yourself, is this love, or is this fear disguised as devotion? The answer will shape every relationship you build with others and with yourself. Because the truth is this, you cannot own what is meant to be shared, you cannot control what is meant to grow, and you cannot love fully until you stop mistaking control for care. Freedom is not the end of love, it is the only place where love can begin. Chapter 2. Obsession's Hidden Grip. Understanding Emotional Enslavement. Obsession never starts as darkness. It starts as devotion. You don't notice the shift, the slow slide from care into compulsion, from attention into surveillance, from love into fixation. It begins with something beautiful, something pure. You see someone or something that stirs your soul. They awaken a hunger, a sense of meaning you thought you'd lost. And you think this must be what love feels like. At first, obsession feels holy. It gives your life focus. It sharpens everything, your senses, your emotions, your drive. You feel alive. Every interaction feels charged with purpose. You tell yourself you're simply invested, passionate, loyal. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the energy turns. The warmth becomes heat, the closeness becomes dependency, and what once felt like love begins to consume you from the inside out. Obsession is not love intensified, it is love distorted. Love seeks connection, obsession demands control. Love expands, obsession contracts. Love breathes in trust. Obsession suffocates with fear. You start believing that losing what you love would destroy you, that without it, you are nothing. And once that belief takes root, it controls you completely. You build your days around them. You measure your worth by their responses. You study every silence, every delay, every change in tone. You begin living not for connection, but for confirmation, proof that you still matter. That's when the hidden grip of obsession tightens. You might think you're choosing to hold on, but you're not. Obsession chooses you. It hijacks your instincts and rewires your sense of self. It convinces you that your emotions are noble, that your loyalty is proof of your love. It tells you that others don't feel as deeply, that you are simply different, more intense, more passionate, more devoted. But that's the trap. Obsession uses your intensity against you. It turns love into a cage made of emotion. You stop feeling joy when they are near and start feeling panic when they are not. You no longer love them, you depend on them. You no longer want connection, you crave possession, and that craving is bottomless. No amount of reassurance satisfies it. No gesture feels enough. The moment you receive attention, you start fearing its withdrawal. You anticipate distance before it appears. You chase closeness so desperately that you end up pushing it away. The more you grasp, the less you hold. Obsession is hunger disguised as loyalty. You believe you're giving love, but you're feeding a void. That void has nothing to do with the person you fixate on. They are only a mirror, a reflection of the unmet parts of you that still ache to be seen. You think you're obsessed with them, but what you're truly addicted to is what they represent. Validation, identity, worth. When you don't feel whole, love becomes a battlefield. You fight to be chosen, to be needed, to be irreplaceable. You call it loyalty, but it's survival. You are not loving, you are fighting extinction. This is the essence of emotional enslavement. When love becomes a negotiation with your own fears. When you measure affection by sacrifice, when your heart beats to the rhythm of someone else's approval, you lose the ability to stand still within yourself. You start orbiting another person's moods, words, and actions. You shape-shift to maintain connection. You apologize before you've even been accused. You silence your intuition just to keep peace. That is not love, that is captivity. The danger of obsession lies in how reasonable it seems. Society romanticizes it. Songs, movies, stories, they glorify the all-consuming kind of love. The kind that says, I can't live without you. But beneath the poetry of that statement lies a warning. If you cannot live without someone, you have already surrendered your freedom. Obsession promises safety through control, but delivers suffering through dependence. You start equating intensity with depth. You begin to believe that if love doesn't hurt, it must not be real. And so you chase chaos because peace feels like distance. You crave conflict because tension feels alive. It becomes a cycle: attraction, obsession, collapse, regret. Each time you tell yourself you'll do it differently, yet you fall into the same pattern because obsession is not a conscious choice. It is a wound that seeks repetition. Every time you try to control someone else, you're really trying to control your own pain. There's a point in obsession where you begin to lose language. You stop being able to describe what you feel. It's no longer love, but it's not exactly hate. It's a fever, a pull, a gravity that distorts logic. You can see yourself slipping, but you can't stop. The mind justifies what the heart demands. You say, I just care too much. You say, I can't help how I feel. But the truth is, obsession isn't caring too much. It's caring from emptiness. You can't nurture love from a place of lack. When your heart is bound by fear, every act of love becomes a transaction, a desperate attempt to secure your worth. You give not from abundance, but from anxiety. You love not freely, but conditionally. And that kind of love always collapses under its own weight. Obsession blinds you to reality. You start rewriting the story to protect the fantasy. You excuse disrespect because it feeds your need to remain attached. You rationalize distance because it keeps the illusion alive. You confuse longing with love and pain with depth. But real love doesn't demand self-abandonment. Real love invites wholeness, not worship. The hidden grip of obsession extends beyond relationships. It manifests in ambition, perfectionism, success, and image. You can become obsessed with achievement, with being right, with control itself. It's the same pattern, an unending need to prove your value through something external. You chase recognition not because it fulfills you, but because silence terrifies you. You fear stillness because in stillness, you might confront the truth that no amount of control, attention, or success can fill the void of disconnection from self. Obsession thrives on avoidance. It keeps you moving, chasing, fixing, controlling, anything but sitting still long enough to feel what's really underneath. And underneath obsession, there is always grief. Grief for what was lost, grief for what was never received, grief for the parts of you that were never seen, so you learn to grasp instead of trust. That grief must be faced if you ever want to break the cycle. When you are trapped in obsession, it feels like there is no way out. You think freedom means indifference, and you fear indifference more than pain. So you stay. You feed the loop. You surrender your time, your energy, your peace just to feel connected. But freedom from obsession isn't about becoming cold or detached. It's about reclaiming your center. It's about remembering that love cannot thrive in desperation. You cannot control someone into staying. You cannot beg your way into being enough. You can, however, face your fear of emptiness. The moment you stop running from that emptiness, the grip of obsession begins to weaken. You start to see that what you were chasing was never about the other person. It was about your own lost power. You were never addicted to them. You were addicted to the feeling of being needed, the illusion that your existence mattered because someone depended on you, desired you, or defined you. Once you see that, the illusion begins to dissolve. Breaking free from obsession is not an act of detachment. It's an act of integration. You don't destroy the part of you that obsesses. You bring it home. You acknowledge its fear, its longing, its desperation to belong. You look it in the eye and say, I see you. I understand why you held on so tightly, but we are safe now. That's how healing begins, not by rejecting the shadow, but by understanding its origin. The shadow of obsession is born from the wound of abandonment. Somewhere deep within, you learned that love could be taken away, that safety was conditional, that attention must be earned. So you became vigilant. You believed that control would prevent pain. But obsession doesn't protect you from pain. It prolongs it. When you finally allow yourself to feel the original wound, the fear of being left, the grief of being unseen, the obsession loses its power. You no longer need to chase what left because you've begun to return to yourself. And in that return, something remarkable happens. The intensity doesn't disappear, it transforms. It becomes presence. It becomes devotion that does not demand, passion that does not imprison. You start to see love not as something to consume, but as something to witness. Not as a way to complete yourself, but as a mirror for what already exists within. There is a moment of quiet that follows release, the kind of silence that feels both terrifying and sacred. That silence is freedom. You may miss the chaos at first. You may miss the adrenaline, the highs and lows, the constant rush of feeling. But over time, peace begins to feel more powerful than drama ever did. Freedom gives you back your breath. It gives you back your perspective. It allows you to see others not as possessions, but as partners in evolution, people who walk beside you, not people you must hold captive. When you can love someone without trying to own them, you have broken the cycle. The hidden grip of obsession is not eternal. It is only as strong as your willingness to believe that love and control are the same thing. Once you separate them, the hold dissolves, because the truth is simple and cruel and liberating all at once. You cannot be enslaved by what you've made peace with, and when you make peace with yourself, no obsession can ever own you again. Chapter 3. Recognizing the trap. Identifying when love turns into chains. Possession does not announce itself with cruelty. It arrives wearing tenderness. It hides behind words like devotion, loyalty, and protection. It tells you that love must be proven through sacrifice, that closeness requires control, that to care deeply means to manage every outcome. It feels noble, it feels necessary. But beneath that warmth, something darker begins to grow. The trap is built slowly. You do not wake up one morning chained. The chains are woven one strand at a time, each made of a promise, a compromise, an excuse. You think this is just love. This is just how intimacy works. But over time, what was once affection becomes confinement. The gestures that once felt safe now feel suffocating. Recognizing that moment, the shift from love to captivity, is one of the hardest forms of awareness a person can develop. Because when love turns into chains, it doesn't feel wrong at first. It feels secure. It feels special. It feels like belonging. That is what makes the trap so dangerous. The first sign of possession is fear disguised as love. It might sound like, "I just worry about you." It might sound like, "I can't help how much I care." It might sound like, "You're my whole world." These phrases sound innocent, even sweet, but hidden beneath them is the seed of ownership, the belief that loving someone gives you the right to direct them, to define them, to monitor them. Love becomes less about connection and more about control. You start to notice subtle shifts. The person who once asked what you wanted now tells you what you should do. The one who admired your independence now questions it. Every choice becomes a negotiation, every boundary a test. You find yourself explaining your actions, defending your decisions, apologizing for being yourself. And yet you stay because part of you still believes this is love. The mind rationalizes what the heart resists. You say they just care too much. You say I make them anxious because they love me so deeply. You say no relationship is perfect. You say everything except the truth. This doesn't feel like love anymore. The second sign is guilt as currency. Control rarely operates through force. It operates through emotion. A look, a silence, a withdrawal of warmth. These small gestures are enough to make you question yourself. You begin anticipating their moods, adjusting your words, shrinking your boundaries just to avoid tension. You tell yourself it's easier this way, that you're keeping the peace. But the peace you're keeping is not peace at all. It's submission dressed as harmony. You become conditioned to think that love is something you must earn, that affection can be withdrawn if you displease them, that your needs are secondary to their comfort. You forget that mutual respect is supposed to be the foundation, not a privilege to be one. Before you realize it, guilt becomes your leash. You start apologizing for feeling hurt. You start minimizing your pain to protect theirs. You stop asking for what you need because the price feels too high. The relationship becomes a performance, one where your silence buys temporary peace and your compliance buys conditional love. That is how love becomes a cage. The third sign is isolation masked as intimacy. It happens so quietly you barely notice. The circle of your world begins to shrink. You start spending less time with friends, less time alone, less time doing what nourished you. You tell yourself that it's natural relationships require time, closeness, commitment. But what's really happening is that your identity is dissolving. The more you fuse into them, the less of you remains. They say, you don't need anyone else. They say they don't understand us. They say we're different. And soon you start believing it. You stop seeking perspective. You stop questioning the dynamic. You start depending on their approval for every emotional need. What began as love has become addiction. You crave their presence even when it hurts you. You cling to their validation even when it costs you your peace. You confuse the intensity of attachment for depth of connection. But intimacy without freedom is not love, it's captivity disguised as unity. Recognizing the trap requires brutal honesty. It demands that you look beyond the story you tell yourself and face the energy beneath it. Because possession doesn't just happen to you, part of you participates in it. You stay because part of you is afraid to be alone. You comply because part of you needs to be chosen. You surrender because part of you fears losing control more than losing yourself. And yet, awareness begins the moment you stop justifying what drains you. You might think leaving a possessive dynamic means cutting the other person out completely. But sometimes the first step isn't leaving, it's seeing. Seeing how control operates. Seeing how you've been trained to equate love with pain. Seeing how you've built your identity around being needed instead of being free. Once you see the pattern, it can no longer hide in the shadows. Possessiveness does not always come from malice. It often comes from fear, fear of abandonment, fear of betrayal, fear of being unseen. But understanding the wound behind it doesn't make the behavior less damaging. Compassion without boundaries becomes complicity. You can empathize with someone's pain while refusing to be destroyed by it. Recognizing the trap means reclaiming your right to emotional safety. It means realizing that love should not demand you shrink. It should not punish you for independence. It should not make you feel watched, weighed, or indebted. It should not hurt just to keep peace. When love becomes an equation you can't win, when you are constantly adjusting yourself to stay acceptable, you are no longer in love. You are surviving it. There's another layer to this trap, one that often goes unnoticed, self-possession that turns into self-oppression. Sometimes you are both the captor and the captive. You become your own warden, controlling your emotions so tightly that no one can hurt you. You guard your vulnerability like a secret, convincing yourself that restraint equals strength. You don't let yourself ask for help. You don't admit fear. You don't allow softness. Because somewhere deep down, you believe that control will protect you from the chaos of loss. But when you control yourself to the point of suffocation, you are still enslaved, only now the prison is internal. True freedom requires releasing the illusion that safety can be manufactured through control. There are small moments, quiet ones, where you sense the truth. A conversation that feels rehearsed. A silence that feels heavy. A flash of awareness that something is deeply wrong. These are the cracks in the illusion. Pay attention to those cracks. They are not weakness. They are truth trying to reach you. When you start to see the pattern, it will hurt. The realization that what you thought was love was control will feel like betrayal. You will grieve not just the relationship, but the version of yourself that believed it was the only way to be loved. That grief is sacred. It is the first act of freedom. To recognize the trap is to reclaim your sight. It's to stand at the edge of the illusion and say, I see you now. You begin to understand that love and ownership are incompatible, that devotion cannot coexist with fear, that loyalty born from control is not loyalty, it's obedience. You start to remember who you were before the cage, the self that laughed freely, the self that did not seek permission to exist, the self that could love without losing identity. That remembrance is power, because once you remember yourself, no one can own you again. Breaking the illusion does not require war. It requires awakening. It requires the courage to say, this does not feel like love and I will not call it that anymore. It means confronting the part of you that believed control was care, that intensity was proof, that suffering was devotion. It means releasing the fantasy that love must hurt to be real. Love does not bind, it liberates. When you understand that, the trap begins to dissolve. The guilt, the fear, the confusion, they start to lose their hold. You begin to breathe again. And in that breath, you discover a truth deeper than control. Love that allows freedom does not fade. It transforms. It evolves. It endures. So when you feel the urge to grip tighter, pause. When you feel guilt for wanting space, pause. When you find yourself justifying what feels wrong, pause. Ask yourself, does this connection expand me or confine me? Do I feel safe or do I feel small? Do I love this person or do I fear losing them? Your answers will reveal whether love is your sanctuary or your cage. To recognize the trap is not weakness. It is the first act of sovereignty, because the moment you see the chains, you've already begun to outgrow them. Chapter 4. Emotional Mastery in Attachment. Maintaining balance amid desire. Attachment can feel like a storm wearing a mask of stillness. On the surface, you may appear calm, devoted, loyal. Beneath, the waters swirl with longing, fear, and the urge to claim what you love as yours. That desire to hold, to keep, to ensure nothing slips away. It can feel like protection, but it often hides a quiet desperation, the terror of loss. When you care deeply, you risk obsession. When you crave intimacy, you risk suffocation. The more someone means to you, the more they awaken your shadows. The fear of being abandoned, betrayed, or replaced. These fears do not make you weak, they make you human. But when they steer your behavior, attachment transforms into possession. True emotional mastery does not mean cutting off feelings or pretending detachment. It means learning to face your storms without drowning in them. It means allowing yourself to desire without demanding, to love without needing control. The pulse beneath possession. Behind every possessive thought there is a heartbeat that says, I don't want to lose you. This is where mastery begins, not with denial but with awareness. To master your emotions, you must first listen to them without acting on their impulses. Jealousy, for example, is not purely toxic. It reveals what you value and what you fear. It can show you where you feel unsafe or unworthy. The moment you name it, truly name it without judgment, you rob it of its power to dictate your actions. Possession thrives in the shadows of repression. When you refuse to feel something, it grows stronger, waiting for an unguarded moment to surge through your words or your silence. But when you let yourself feel everything consciously, anger, envy, fear, desire, you transform raw emotion into information. Awareness turns the poison into insight. Emotional mastery does not promise comfort. It promises clarity. You begin to see which emotions seek protection and which seek control. You begin to sense when love flows freely and when it becomes an anchor pulling you under. The art of emotional observation. Imagine sitting quietly while the storm rages inside. You do not try to silence it or argue with it. You simply watch. You watch the thoughts, the sensations, the rise of heat in your chest, the tension in your throat. You let it unfold without reaction. This act of observation is not passivity. It is power. It allows the emotion to pass through you rather than consume you. You remain rooted while the waves crash, like a tree that bends but does not break. Many lose themselves because they believe emotions demand action. But emotion is energy, not command. You can acknowledge a feeling without obeying it. You can hear the inner voice that says, don't let them go, and still choose to open your hand. To master attachment is to master the space between feeling and response. That is where freedom lies. Intensity without imprisonment. There is beauty in your depth. You love with a fullness others can only imagine. You give yourself completely, and that capacity for intensity is a gift. But it becomes a curse when it turns into control. Mastery does not mean dimming your passion. It means channeling it. The same fire that burns can also warm, heal, and illuminate. You do not need to become colder to be balanced. You need to become conscious. Ask yourself, what am I trying to protect by holding on too tightly? Often the answer is your identity, your sense of safety, your fear of emptiness. When you begin to trust that you can survive loss, you no longer need to bind others to you. The paradox is this: the less you try to control, the more power you gain. People feel your steadiness. They sense your emotional sovereignty. You become magnetic, not because you grasp, but because you radiate calm authority. The anatomy of emotional control. Control in its truest form is not about manipulating others. It is about mastering yourself. It means knowing when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when silence speaks louder. You do not owe your emotions obedience. You owe them understanding. Every feeling arises for a reason. Mastery means learning to interpret, not suppress. When anger comes, it may point to a boundary violated. When jealousy surfaces, it may reveal insecurity or comparison. When fear emerges, it may ask for reassurance or release. Instead of reacting, inquire. Ask your emotion what it needs from you. Sometimes it asks for truth. Sometimes it asks for courage. Sometimes it asks for stillness. When you listen deeply, you no longer project your turmoil onto others. You hold it, transform it, and respond with grace. Desire and the shadow of control. Desire is not the enemy. Unconscious desire is. When you long for someone, when you crave closeness, there is nothing wrong with that. The danger lies in believing your peace depends on their presence. The moment you tether your worth to another, you surrender sovereignty. You become vulnerable not through love, but through dependence. Emotional mastery allows you to love fiercely without losing your sense of self. When you feel the pull of obsession rising, the urge to check, to question, to demand, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself whether you are trying to connect or to control. Connection invites. Control coerces. One nourishes intimacy, the other breeds resistance. You cannot force what must be freely given. You cannot bind loyalty through fear. Every time you let go of the impulse to dominate, you make space for genuine devotion to grow, transforming fear into presence. Fear is the root beneath possession. Fear of loss, fear of betrayal, fear of being unseen. The mind responds by tightening its grip, but mastery means loosening it, not in defiance but in trust. Trust does not mean blind faith in another person. It means confidence in your ability to remain whole, no matter what happens. It means trusting that you can rebuild yourself if something ends, that you can hold grief without collapsing into it. When you stop fearing the end, you begin to live fully in the present. Love becomes an experience, not a strategy. Connection becomes a choice, not a cage. Every time you release control, you tell yourself, I can handle this. And every time you prove it true, fear loses another piece of its hold on you. Emotional regulation as power. In the heat of intensity, the body becomes a battlefield. The pulse quickens, the breath shortens, thoughts spiral. This is the body's way of protecting itself from perceived threat. But love is not a threat. It only feels like one when we equate attachment with survival. You can train your nervous system to recognize safety even in uncertainty. Slow breathing grounds you. Naming the emotion anchors you. Stepping away from immediate reaction restores perspective. The more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. Emotional mastery is not about being unaffected. It is about being unshaken. It means you can feel the storm, but choose your direction within it. You no longer fear the intensity of emotion because you know you can navigate it. The mirror of self. Every person who triggers your possessiveness is showing you something about yourself. They are mirrors reflecting your unmet needs and unhealed fears. When you look into those mirrors with curiosity rather than blame, you discover your own power. You learn that what you thought was about them was always about you. Your longing for reassurance, your hunger for permanence, your struggle to trust your own worth. Emotional mastery turns the focus inward. You stop trying to fix others and start nurturing your inner stability. From that grounded state, love becomes lighter, freer, and far more authentic. The quiet after the storm. When you begin to master your emotions, relationships change. The same situations that once consumed you now pass like clouds. You still feel deeply, but you no longer drown in every wave. You start to notice peace where there was once tension, clarity where confusion reigned. The power you sought through control is replaced by the quiet strength of composure. People respond differently to you. They sense the calm in your presence, the steadiness in your eyes. You no longer chase reassurance, you embody it. You no longer demand trust, you become trustworthy. This is the transformation that control can never achieve. You cannot dominate your way into peace. You must cultivate it. Closing reflection. Emotional mastery is not a finish line, it is a lifelong practice. Some days you will hold your center with ease. Other days the old fears will rise again, whispering their familiar lies. But every time you choose awareness over reaction, presence over panic, you reclaim a piece of your freedom. The goal is not to feel less. It is to feel everything without being enslaved by it, to burn without destruction, to love without losing yourself. You are learning the art of intensity with grace, the rare balance of fire and calm. In mastering your emotions, you master your life. And in mastering your life, you discover that freedom and attachment can coexist, not as rivals but as dance partners moving in perfect, conscious rhythm. Chapter 5. Releasing control without losing connection. Finding freedom within relationships. Control promises safety. It whispers that if you can hold everything tightly enough, nothing will fall apart. It seduces you with the illusion of order, of predictability, of certainty. Yet every time you grip harder, life finds a way to slip through your fingers. People drift. Circumstances shift. The tighter you hold, the more you lose the very essence of what you were trying to protect, authentic connection. Releasing control is not about apathy or detachment. It is about trust. It is about standing in your power while allowing others to stand in theirs. It means learning to share space without occupying it completely, to let others breathe, decide, and be without the weight of your fear pressing against their freedom. But this release can feel like death at first, a small ego death wrapped in silence. You must confront the part of you that equates love with possession, safety with control. That part will fight. It will panic. It will bargain. Yet on the other side of its collapse lies peace, not loss. The tension between freedom and fear. You want to be close, but you also want to feel secure. You want connection, but you fear exposure. You want devotion, but you also crave independence. This tension is not a flaw in your design. It is the raw material of intimacy. Control enters when fear becomes louder than trust, when you stop believing in the strength of the bond and start trying to force its survival. The mind begins to strategize, what to say, how to act, what to withhold, what to demand. The connection shifts from spontaneous to staged. You cannot force genuine love into submission. You can demand loyalty but not devotion. You can command presence but not attention. When you control out of fear, you trade depth for stability, a hollow kind of safety. Freedom in connection means allowing uncertainty. It means letting others make choices that could change everything, and trusting that your worth will remain intact regardless of their decision. The art of allowing. Allowing is not passive. It is one of the most courageous acts you can perform. To allow someone to come and go, to express themselves freely, to have thoughts and needs different from yours, this requires immense inner strength. Allowing does not mean tolerating harm or neglect. It means making peace with reality. It means recognizing that love cannot grow in captivity. You can nurture a bond, but you cannot confine it. You can inspire loyalty, but you cannot enforce it. The more you allow, the more life shows you who truly wants to stay. Authentic relationships reveal themselves only in freedom. You cannot know who loves you for you until you stop making it a requirement. Allowing does not diminish intimacy, it purifies it. It strips away the manipulation, the emotional bargaining, the constant undercurrent of fear. What remains is choice, and choice is the foundation of real connection. The moment of letting go. Letting go is not a single event, it is a continual surrender. Each day you release the small controls, the need to be right, the need to be understood immediately, the need to know what someone is feeling at all times. You let go of analyzing their tone, decoding their silences, rehearsing what you'll say next. You let go of predicting outcomes. Instead, you return to presence. You ask yourself, what is happening right now within me? In that question lies liberation, because once you become aware of your own inner landscape, you stop trying to shape someone else's. You realize that what you truly crave is not dominance but connection, and connection cannot bloom in the soil of control. Letting go feels like losing power, but it's the opposite. You reclaim energy that was wasted on managing others. You stop guarding and start living. The nervous system quiets. The mind stops spinning. The heart beats in rhythm with life instead of against it. The illusion of safety through control. The need for control often grows from an old wound, the moment you felt powerless, unseen, or abandoned. Somewhere deep within, you decided that vigilance was the only way to stay safe. But vigilance is exhausting. It keeps you in survival mode long after the threat has passed. You may not even realize how much tension your body carries until you start to relax. Control gives the illusion of safety, but it also builds walls that block intimacy. When you are always managing the narrative, you are never fully present. You are always half a step ahead, bracing for impact, rehearsing your defenses. True safety comes not from control but from capacity, the capacity to handle whatever comes. When you trust your resilience, you no longer need to orchestrate every outcome. Love without chains. To love without control is to honor both your sovereignty and theirs. It is to see another as a complete being, not an extension of your comfort. You begin to appreciate their differences instead of fearing them. You learn to witness rather than possess. When you stop needing someone to behave a certain way for you to feel okay, love becomes expansive. It stops being a negotiation and starts being a discovery. Each day reveals new layers, not because you demanded them, but because the space between you feels safe enough for authenticity to unfold. Love is not about merging into one. It is about dancing as two whole beings who choose every day to move together. The rhythm may change, but the dance remains alive. Boundaries that breathe. Releasing control does not mean surrendering boundaries. In fact, it makes boundaries clearer. When you are not trying to dominate, you can define your limits with calm confidence. You can say, "This is what I need," without fear of rejection. You can say, "I cannot accept this," without hostility. Boundaries are not barriers, they are breathing room. They allow both people to exist fully within the connection. When both partners feel free to express their truth, trust deepens. Control says, "Do as I need so I can feel safe." Boundaries say, "I take responsibility for my own safety." One traps, the other empowers. Surrender as strength. Surrender is often misunderstood as weakness. But real surrender is not collapse, it is confidence in motion. It is the recognition that you are strong enough to let life unfold without forcing it. You surrender the illusion of control not because you've given up, but because you've grown beyond the need for constant defense. You no longer need to dominate the moment to survive it. When you surrender, you invite truth. People reveal themselves. Life reveals its next step. You start to see what is genuinely aligned with you, and what was only held together by your fear of letting go. This surrender births clarity. You see which connections are built on love and which were built on control disguised as care. Freedom inside connection. Freedom does not mean distance. It means choice. It means being able to say yes without obligation, no without guilt, and goodbye without collapse. In a healthy connection, both people breathe freely. There is mutual respect for individuality. There is curiosity instead of surveillance, faith instead of fixation. When you stop gripping, you start receiving. You become a safe place, not a cage. Others feel drawn to your presence because it holds no threat. It offers openness, not entrapment. The irony of control is that it kills the very intimacy it tries to preserve. The irony of release is that it deepens it. Freedom sustains love far longer than fear ever could. The quiet power of trust. Trust is the soul of connection, not the kind of trust that demands proof, but the kind that knows how to rest in uncertainty. You build this trust one breath at a time, by staying grounded in moments when you want to panic, by choosing silence over interrogation, by believing that if something is meant to stay, it will stay. Trust does not make you naive. It makes you brave. It allows you to experience life as it is, without the exhausting need to constantly verify it. When trust replaces control, relationships become a sanctuary, not a battlefield. You stop fighting for power and start creating peace. Closing reflection. Releasing control does not mean losing connection. It means exchanging a fragile grip for a steady heart. It means replacing fear with presence, desperation with awareness, and manipulation with faith. When you stop forcing love, it finds its natural rhythm. When you stop defending against loss, you start experiencing abundance. Every act of release is an act of trust, in yourself and others, in the unseen flow that carries all things forward. There will be moments when your old habits call to you, when fear urges you to tighten your hold again. In those moments, remember this. Connection built on control is temporary, but connection rooted in freedom endures. Let go not to lose, but to finally experience love as it was meant to be, alive, unbound, and fiercely real. Chapter 6. Aligning desire with integrity. Transforming possession into mutual growth. Desire is the fire that makes life vivid. It burns through complacency, stirs ambition, and forges connection. But left unchecked, it consumes. When desire forgets integrity, it mutates into obsession. When it becomes about having rather than honoring, it corrodes both freedom and love. To align desire with integrity is to bring consciousness into passion. It means allowing your hunger to move through you without letting it dominate your actions. It means asking not only what you want, but why you want it and whether your pursuit elevates or diminishes the soul of what you touch. This is not about restraint for its own sake. It is about precision. Desire without integrity is chaos. Desire guided by integrity becomes power in its purest form. The hidden conflict within desire. Desire is rarely simple. It carries both light and shadow. You may long for connection, but also for validation. You may crave intimacy, but also control. You may seek closeness, but also fear exposure. Without awareness, these contradictions twist your intentions. You may believe you are pursuing love, when in truth you are chasing reassurance. You may think you are protecting someone, when you are really protecting your ego. Integrity begins when you start telling yourself the truth about your motives. Not the polished version that sounds noble, but the raw, uncomfortable truth that hides underneath. Ask yourself, what am I really trying to fulfill? Am I seeking to connect or to claim, to love or to own, to share or to secure? The honesty you practice with yourself determines the purity of every desire you express. Power without corruption. Every relationship contains power. The power to influence, to comfort, to wound. The question is not whether you have power, but whether you use it consciously. When desire mixes with fear, power becomes control. You start shaping another person to fit your needs. You demand constant reassurance, constant attention. What begins as affection becomes surveillance. Integrity in desire means using your power to uplift, not to dominate. It means being aware of how your words, gestures, and silence affect others. It means refusing to weaponize emotion. This kind of awareness transforms relationships from battlegrounds into spaces of growth. Both people evolve because neither is trying to eclipse the other. You begin to see that love is not about winning. It is about awakening. The mirror of intention. Desire reveals who you are when no one is watching. It is the most honest mirror you will ever face. If you chase connection to escape loneliness, it will show you your emptiness. If you crave admiration to feel worthy, it will show you your self-doubt. When you align with integrity, you stop projecting your wounds onto others. You stop expecting them to complete what you have not yet healed. You start relating from fullness instead of hunger. Integrity asks, can I want without taking? Can I admire without possessing? Can I love without consuming? These questions carve out sacred space within you, a place where desire becomes clean, where intensity becomes devotion instead of control. The discipline of desire. True mastery of desire does not mean extinguishing it. It means directing it. It means cultivating enough discipline to let your passion serve creation, not destruction. This discipline is not cold or mechanical. It is fierce compassion toward yourself, toward those you love. It keeps your fire steady instead of letting it flare wildly and burn bridges. When you feel desire rise, pause, breathe, ask what it seeks to express. Sometimes desire is a call to connect. Sometimes it is a call to create. Sometimes it is a sign that something inside you is ready to expand. By pausing, you break the pattern of unconscious reaction. You turn impulse into intention. And intention, guided by integrity, becomes alchemy, when desire becomes domination. The line between passion and possession is drawn by motive. Passion wants to merge, possession wants to control. Passion celebrates, possession consumes. Domination often disguises itself as protection. You tell yourself you're guiding, helping, keeping things safe. But beneath that is often the fear of losing influence. The moment you start shaping someone's choices to keep your comfort intact, integrity has left the room. Healthy desire allows others to evolve, even if that evolution changes how they relate to you. It understands that love must breathe to survive. Integrity asks for courage, the courage to let another grow, even when it means you may outgrow each other. Desire as a spiritual force. When aligned, desire is sacred. It propels you toward deeper truth, connection, and creation. It sharpens your awareness and reveals your capacity for transformation. The body may feel it as longing. The heart may interpret it as love. The mind may try to control it, but at its core, desire is life's insistence on expansion. Integrity is what ensures that expansion doesn't come at the cost of someone else's peace. It ensures that your fire warms instead of scorches. When you hold your desire with reverence, it becomes devotion. It teaches you patience, humility, restraint, and generosity. It becomes less about taking and more about becoming. The temptation of the ego. There will always be a part of you that wants to conquer. That part equates desire with power. It wants to win, to be chosen, to possess. You cannot destroy that part. It holds vital energy. But you can teach it to serve something higher. Instead of asking, how can I make them stay? Ask, how can I make this moment meaningful? Instead of asking, how can I get what I want? Ask, how can I give what is true? The ego wants ownership. The soul wants union. When you align with integrity, you stop confusing the two. You begin to feel the difference between the hunger that drains you and the desire that refines you. Integrity does not starve passion, it elevates it. The practice of alignment. Integrity is not a concept, it is a practice. It shows up in the smallest choices, what you say, how you listen, how you touch, how you walk away. When you feel desire pull at you, ask, is this aligned with respect for both of us? Does this choice bring expansion or contraction? Will this action leave me proud or ashamed when the heat fades? You do not need perfection, only awareness. Every time you act from integrity, you strengthen your core. You begin to trust yourself, and that self-trust quiets the need to control others. Integrity gives desire direction. It transforms chaos into clarity. When desire meets integrity, when desire and integrity merge, love becomes luminous. You no longer chase or manipulate. You invite, you attract, you allow. People feel safe in your presence because your energy carries no hidden hooks. You do not demand, they come willingly. You do not need to prove, you simply are. In this space, intimacy deepens beyond physical or emotional attachment. It becomes a meeting of truth. Both people rise, not because one dominates, but because both choose to evolve together. This is desire purified, passion that builds instead of breaks, intensity that liberates instead of binds. Closing reflection. Desire is sacred fire. It can destroy or illuminate, enslave or awaken. The choice depends on your integrity. When you align your hunger with honesty, your need with respect, and your passion with purpose, you stop fearing your own depth. You no longer hide from your intensity, you wield it with precision. You become magnetic not because you crave control, but because you embody truth. And truth, once embodied, is irresistible. Let your desire burn, but let it burn clean. Let it move through you, not consume you. Let it connect, not conquer. In the end, the only power worth having is the power that frees both hearts, the power of desire aligned with integrity. Chapter 7. Setting boundaries that empower, protecting yourself without alienation. There comes a moment when you realize that love without boundaries isn't love at all, it's absorption. It's the slow erosion of self under the weight of constant giving, constant proving, constant fear of loss. You start to notice how easily your energy leaks away, how quickly your center disappears in the presence of another's need. You begin to sense that something sacred has been violated, not by them alone but by your own silence. Boundaries are not walls. They are sacred lines of self-respect, quiet declarations that say, I exist too. They are not a rejection of love, they are the structure that makes love sustainable. Without them, affection becomes suffocation. Care becomes control. Connection turns into consumption. To set a boundary is to reclaim your life force from those who unknowingly drain it. It is not an act of aggression. It is an act of reverence, both for yourself and for those you care about. Because without clarity, resentment grows in the shadows. Without self-definition, relationships lose their balance. Most people fear boundaries because they associate them with loss. Loss of approval, loss of closeness, loss of control. But the truth is, boundaries are not endings. They are beginnings. They are the threshold where honesty starts. When you finally say, this is what I need, you are not pushing someone away, you are inviting them into truth. You are saying, if you wish to love me, let it be here in this space where I can still breathe. Those who truly care will rise to meet you there. Those who cannot will fall away. And though that may hurt, it is a sacred kind of pain. The pain of alignment, the ache of choosing yourself after years of betrayal by your own compliance. Boundaries are forged in the fire of self-awareness. You cannot set them if you don't know where you end and another begins. That's why, before you can speak your limits aloud, you must first feel them. Ask yourself, what do I tolerate out of fear of rejection? What do I give away hoping to be loved? What silences me when I know I should speak? These questions cut deep because they expose where love has turned into servitude. They reveal where your compassion has been weaponized against you. If your heart tightens when someone demands more than you can give, that's not selfishness. That's your soul whispering that you've crossed a line. When you feel that familiar exhaustion after another interaction, that's not weakness. It's your body signaling that your boundaries have been breached. Boundaries don't begin in words. They begin in sensations. They begin in the stomach that knots when you say yes instead of no, in the breath that shortens when you pretend to be okay, in the weight you feel after giving away too much. Learning to honor those signals is the first step toward empowerment. But here's the paradox. Boundaries often trigger guilt before they bring peace, especially if you've been conditioned to equate self-sacrifice with love. Saying no might feel cruel. Pulling back might feel like abandonment. Yet the longer you delay those small acts of self-honoring, the more you erode the integrity of every connection you touch. Healthy love cannot exist without tension. The tension between two truths. I care about you and I must also care for myself. When you deny one in service to the other, balance collapses. People might not like your boundaries at first, especially if they benefited from your lack of them. Expect resistance. Expect misunderstanding. Expect emotional tests that make you question your right to protect yourself. But hold steady, because here's what boundaries do. They sift out the false from the true. Those who only loved you for your compliance will drift away. Those who value your essence will adapt. And those who mirror your strength will meet you on equal ground. That is how you elevate your relationships from dependency to mutual respect. To set a boundary effectively, you must be clear, consistent, and calm. Clarity prevents confusion. Consistency builds trust. Calmness disarms defensiveness. A boundary spoken in anger becomes an attack. A boundary spoken in fear becomes a plea. But a boundary spoken from grounded self-worth becomes law, not because it controls, but because it commands respect. You can say it softly and still mean it absolutely. You can speak with warmth and still draw a line that will not bend. When you set a boundary, you are not demanding that someone change. You are simply defining how you will engage. You are saying, you are free to act as you wish, and I am free to choose how I respond. That is the essence of empowerment, understanding that your strength lies not in controlling others, but in mastering your own participation. There will be times when setting a boundary feels like losing love, but what you're really losing is illusion, the illusion that closeness must come at the cost of self. Real connection requires truth, and truth always requires limits. When you let go of the fantasy that love means endless availability, you make space for something far more profound, conscious connection. In conscious connection, both people take responsibility for their own energy. Both respect the other's rhythm. Both understand that space is not distance, it's oxygen. Imagine a relationship where both hearts beat freely, not bound by obligation but aligned through choice. That is what boundaries make possible. Still, boundaries are not just about saying no. They are also about defining your yes. They are the architecture of your authenticity, the structure that allows you to give wholeheartedly because you know you are safe. When you know your limits, you can offer your energy freely without resentment. You can show up fully without fear of depletion. You can love deeply without losing yourself. Boundaries make generosity sustainable. They transform giving from a desperate attempt to earn love into a conscious expression of it. They remind you that love is not proven by endurance. It is revealed through honesty. Sometimes, the hardest boundary to set is with yourself. You must guard against the urge to overextend, to fix, to rescue, to control. You must protect your peace from your own habits of self-betrayal. Because even if the world respects your limits, none of it will matter if you keep breaking them internally. The person you must learn to stop abandoning is you. That means listening when your body says rest. It means walking away when your spirit says enough. It means allowing silence to replace explanation when others refuse to understand. Your inner boundaries teach the outer world how to treat you. To the one who fears setting boundaries because it might drive people away, understand this. Boundaries don't ruin relationships, they reveal them. Every time you draw a line, the universe whispers, "Now we will see who belongs on your side of it." Those who walk away are not your punishment, they are your purification. Every departure creates more space for alignment, more room for the kind of love that does not require you to shrink. What remains after the shedding is what's real, what was always strong enough to handle your truth. And in that truth lies the quiet power of sovereignty. Boundaries are not about control, they are about freedom. The freedom to feel safe within your own skin. The freedom to express love without fear of exploitation. The freedom to live without apology for being whole. They are not weapons, they are doors. Ones that open to those who can meet you with respect and close to those who cannot. In the end, the purpose of a boundary is not separation but clarity. It allows both people to know exactly where they stand, what is sacred, what is negotiable, and what is not. When clarity replaces confusion, intimacy can finally thrive. Setting boundaries that empower means learning to hold compassion and firmness at the same time. It means being kind but unwavering, open but discerning. It means saying yes to connection without saying no to yourself. And when you master this, your energy changes. You move through the world with quiet confidence. People feel your strength before you speak. You no longer need to defend your space, it defends itself. You become a sanctuary unto yourself. Love then stops being a battlefield. It becomes a dance, two sovereign beings moving in rhythm, neither chasing nor retreating but meeting in the sacred middle. That is the power of empowered boundaries. They don't divide love, they define it. Yep. They don't end connection, they elevate it. So breathe deep, stand firm, speak clearly, and remember, protecting your peace is not selfish. It is sacred, because only when you are safe within yourself can you truly love without fear. Chapter 8. Systems that sustain healthy connections. Structures that protect both parties. Love thrives in freedom, but freedom requires structure. Without boundaries, routine, and agreed-upon rhythms, passion can slip into chaos or control. The most harmonious connections aren't spontaneous explosions of emotion. They're carefully tended systems that allow both people to feel safe, seen, and sovereign. When you build systems that sustain love, you are not restricting it. You are giving it a home strong enough to hold its storms. The architecture of emotional safety. Every relationship, romantic, familial, professional, operates within an invisible architecture. Some people build theirs unconsciously, reacting to needs as they arise. Others construct with intention, communication frameworks, emotional agreements, daily rituals that anchor trust. Without this architecture, connection becomes fragile. Emotional safety requires knowing where each person stands, what is acceptable, what isn't, and how to restore balance when tension arises. A system is not cold or mechanical. It is a sanctuary. It holds you both accountable to the values you share. Examples of emotional architecture include check-in rituals, daily or weekly moments to realign and clear misunderstandings, boundary affirmations, reiterating individual needs before resentment grows, conflict agreements, establishing how to disagree without destruction, tone, timing, and truthfulness, energy resets, recognizing when space, rest, or silence are needed instead of pushing through disconnection. These systems are invisible protectors. They stop obsession before it festers, not by denying emotion but by channeling it through clarity. Emotional systems are containers for power. Intensity, if uncontained, consumes. A possessive person often fears loss because they lack containment, the sense that love can endure even without control. When systems are in place, love becomes self-sustaining. For example, a partner who trusts that weekly quality time is sacred won't panic during a busy day of silence. A leader who establishes clear delegation channels won't micromanage their team. A friend who knows emotional honesty is valued won't suppress truth to maintain peace. Systems create predictability without rigidity. They allow freedom within form. The paradox is that structure liberates. It doesn't imprison. The possessive mind fears the unknown. Systems turn the unknown into something navigable. Rituals that regulate the heart. Rituals are spiritual systems. They mark transitions, soothe fears, and reinforce connection. When you introduce sacred consistency into a relationship, you teach your nervous system and your partners that connection is dependable. Try incorporating morning connection moments, brief exchanges of gratitude, intention, or tenderness before the day begins. Evening grounding rituals, reviewing the day without judgment, sharing emotions openly. Weekly solitude hours, sacred space for individual reflection, creativity, or rest. Recommitment gestures, subtle ways to renew loyalty and affection regularly, even in silence. These practices become emotional anchors. They counteract the instability that fuels control. When connection is rhythmically reaffirmed, the compulsion to possess weakens. Agreements that liberate, not bind. The most effective relationship systems are based on agreements, not demands. An agreement is conscious and mutual. It is born of dialogue, not fear. It empowers both sides to choose alignment over obedience. A demand, on the other hand, is born of insecurity. It enforces compliance at the cost of intimacy. Ask yourself, do my rules protect love, or do they protect my ego? Are my expectations rooted in mutual respect or in fear of being replaced? Am I creating systems that invite freedom, or ones that disguise control as care? Healthy agreements respect individuality. They honor timing, boundaries, and unique emotional capacities. When both parties co-create the system, loyalty becomes a choice renewed, not a cage endured. The system as mirror. Every system you design reflects your internal state. If your systems rely on constant check-ins, perhaps your trust is still fragile. If they are too loose, maybe you fear confrontation. If they are punitive, perhaps control has become a comfort. The goal is balance, a structure flexible enough to adapt but firm enough to contain. A system that reflects mutual growth, not mutual surveillance. Before creating relationship systems, create inner systems, emotional regulation, clear values, and personal rituals of calm. Without inner order, external systems collapse into manipulation. Freedom as a shared framework. Possessive love isolates. Conscious love integrates. When both partners agree that autonomy is sacred, the relationship evolves beyond fear. Freedom within a relationship means trusting the connection enough to let it breathe. It means replacing monitoring with meaning and replacing control with communication. Systems help you stay connected without fusing. They preserve individuality within unity. When both people feel safe to express, explore, and evolve, the relationship becomes a living organism, constantly regenerating rather than decaying. The paradox of structure and surrender. To the controlling mind, systems seem restrictive. To the awakened heart, they are pathways to surrender. Structure does not confine, it clarifies. It tells your nervous system, you are safe here, and in that safety, the need to dominate dissolves. You can love without holding too tightly. You can stay without being trapped. You can belong without being owned. When systems are built from mutual respect, they turn love into art, something both durable and divine. Reflection practice. 1. Identify 3 patterns in your relationships where chaos or uncertainty feeds possessiveness. 2. Create one emotional system for each, a communication ritual, a shared boundary, or a trust-building practice. 3. Commit to maintaining it for 30 days and observe how your emotions shift. You are not meant to master others. You are meant to master the energy that binds you. When you learn to contain power with compassion, love no longer needs chains. It thrives in the freedom of conscious structure. Chapter 9. Recognizing toxic patterns. Breaking free from repeated cycles of possession. Possession doesn't always arrive with noise. It often enters quietly through gestures that appear caring, through promises that sound romantic, through loyalty that slowly becomes confinement. Toxic patterns of control rarely feel toxic at first. They feel familiar, safe, comforting, but familiarity is not the same as safety. And comfort, when built upon fear or dependency, is the most seductive prison of all. The cycle always begins with need. Every possessive dynamic begins with an unmet need, a longing for security, validation, or certainty. This need magnetizes another person who either fulfills it or mirrors it. Together, the two form a circuit of emotional dependency. At first, this circuit feels electric. You complete each other's sentences, soothe each other's wounds, and declare it must be fate. But what feels like destiny may simply be resonance between wounds. Soon, the energy shifts. One begins to control to avoid abandonment, the other submits to avoid conflict. The cycle deepens. The same fear, loss, drives both, just in opposite directions. You may tell yourself it's love, but love nourishes, obsession consumes. To break the cycle, you must first trace its beginning, the need beneath the need. What are you truly trying to protect, your heart or your illusion of control? Emotional echoes from the past. Possession thrives on repetition. What feels like an irresistible connection may actually be an echo of something unresolved, often from early attachments or past heartbreaks. You are drawn to what feels unfinished, to the person who reminds you of someone you couldn't save, someone who left, or someone you had to control to feel loved. When you repeat a toxic pattern, your subconscious is not trying to punish you, it's trying to resolve the old story. But without awareness, you end up recreating the wound instead of healing it. Ask yourself, does this dynamic feel strangely familiar? Am I more comfortable in intensity than in peace? Do I equate attention with love and distance with rejection? Until these patterns are named, they own you. Once named, you reclaim choice. The illusion of sacrifice. Toxic control often disguises itself as devotion. I'm doing this because I care. I'm only protective because I love you. But love never demands the extinction of one soul to preserve another. The illusion of sacrifice whispers that losing yourself is noble, that giving up your autonomy, privacy, or peace is a small price to pay for love. But sacrifice born from fear is not love, it's survival. Healthy relationships require exchange, not erasure. You give and receive in balance, each nourishing the other without depletion. When one person's emotional security depends on another's compliance, the bond has already turned into bondage. The possessor's mirror. It's easy to spot toxicity in others, harder to see it in yourself. Yet self-awareness is the only escape. Ask, do I try to monitor or manage others' emotions to feel safe? Do I equate disagreement with rejection? Do I use guilt or silence to regain control? Do I feel relief when others depend on me? These are not signs of malice but of fear. Possession is not a character flaw, it is an unhealed wound masquerading as care. Recognizing it requires courage, not shame. True strength is not domination, it's restraint. It's the ability to love without needing to own. When obsession feels like home, many people mistake obsession for love because it feels alive. The chaos, the longing, the highs and lows, these mimic emotional intensity, but they are really adrenaline and anxiety dressed as passion. When peace feels boring, it's usually because your nervous system is addicted to instability. You've learned that love equals survival drama. Calm feels empty because it doesn't trigger the old pattern of chase and rescue. Healing begins when you teach your body that safety is not apathy, it's stability. That love can be gentle and still powerful. That connection can be deep without being consuming. Breaking the cycle, freedom requires interruption. To stop repeating toxic possession patterns, you must consciously disrupt the old rhythm. 1. Pause before reacting. Every impulse to control, text, monitor, or demand is an invitation to observe the wound. Ask what emotion you're avoiding. 2. Detach from the storyline. The mind will justify control as love. Don't argue with the narrative, witness it. 3. Reclaim your time and rituals. Reconnect to activities, solitude, and practices that recenter your identity outside the relationship. 4. Redefine love. Replace belonging to with being with. Replace keeping with connecting. Breaking the cycle is not about ending the relationship. It's about ending the illusion that love requires ownership. The courage to see the pattern. Awareness is liberation, but it is also grief. When you see a toxic pattern clearly, you must confront how long you've lived inside it. You will mourn the versions of yourself who thought control was safety. You will grieve the moments when love felt like surrendering your will. That mourning is holy. It's the purification that precedes freedom. Every time you choose awareness over reaction, you weaken the old pattern's hold. Every time you breathe instead of control, you rewire your emotional DNA. Freedom is not found in another person's behavior. It's found in your decision to stop repeating your own. Love after the pattern. Once you've tasted freedom, you will never again confuse control for care. You'll crave connection that honors sovereignty, love that breathes, loyalty that uplifts instead of confines. And when someone tries to pull you back into the old dance, through jealousy, guilt, or dependency, you'll recognize the tune instantly. The spell will no longer work because you'll no longer need the illusion it offered. Possession loses power the moment you refuse to play your part in its repetition. Reflection practice. 1. Identify one recurring pattern in your relationships, romantic or otherwise, that triggers control or fear. 2. Trace it back. Where did you first learn that behavior? Whose love felt conditional? 3. Create a new rule for yourself. One act of freedom for every old reflex of control. Replace reaction with awareness, possession with pause. The cycle ends not when you find someone new, but when you meet yourself differently. When you love without the need to possess, you become unshakable because your peace no longer depends on anyone's obedience. Chapter 10. The Alchemy of Freedom, Turning Desire into Connection and Growth. Freedom and desire often appear to be opposites. One wants to soar, the other to hold. One seeks expansion, the other wants closeness. Yet true connection demands that both coexist. When desire is fused with freedom, it becomes devotion instead of control. That fusion, the sacred meeting point between passion and independence, is what transforms possession into growth. Alchemy begins with recognition. You must first see that desire itself is not the enemy. The need to own, to claim, to merge. These impulses are not sins of the heart. They are echoes of longing, proof that you are capable of deep feeling. The problem arises when desire turns desperate, when it becomes a way to escape loneliness instead of celebrate connection. Freedom is not the absence of attachment. It is attachment without imprisonment. The element of transformation. Desire, left unchecked, burns, but when directed, it illuminates. The alchemy of freedom is the process of refining desire, of taking raw passion and purifying it through awareness, restraint, and intention. It is fire harnessed for warmth rather than destruction. In every relationship, two forces are at play, the urge to merge and the instinct to protect individuality. When one consumes the other, imbalance forms. But when both are honored, something higher emerges, a relationship that breathes. Ask yourself, can I desire someone without needing to control their choices? Can I love deeply without losing my boundaries? Can I stay rooted in myself while sharing my heart completely? If the answer is yes, then you are practicing emotional alchemy, the shadow of desire. To master anything, you must first confront its shadow. The shadow of desire is greed, the insatiable hunger to possess what cannot be fully owned. Greed turns love into acquisition. It shifts the focus from being with to having. But possession is brittle. It fears change, fears time, fears the unknown. It clings to what is fading instead of trusting what is alive. Freedom, in contrast, accepts impermanence. It knows that love is not a static treasure but a living force that must breathe to survive. When you hold someone tightly out of fear, you suffocate what you love. When you release control, you give love the oxygen it needs to grow. Desire becomes toxic only when you believe it entitles you to ownership. The power of conscious passion. Passion does not have to devour. It can enlighten. Conscious passion is an energy directed toward growth for yourself and the other person. It says, I want you to thrive even if your path evolves beyond my understanding. It says, I am drawn to your freedom, not threatened by it. To cultivate this, you must learn to hold dual awareness, the intensity of your desire and the calm of your self-possession. This duality is the heart of emotional maturity. When you feel the pull to control, pause, let the heat rise, then cool. Listen to the emotion beneath the surface. Often it's not desire speaking, it's fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of losing significance, fear of being unseen. When you meet that fear with tenderness instead of suppression, you transmute it. What once sought to control becomes a deeper capacity to connect. This is the secret of emotional alchemy. What you resist enslaves you. What you embrace transforms you. Freedom within connection. Imagine a relationship as two flames dancing beside each other. When you lean too close, you consume one another. When you drift too far, the warmth fades. Balance is found in movement, sometimes close, sometimes apart, always aware. The alchemy of freedom lies in allowing this dance. You do not fear distance because you trust the bond. You do not grasp at control because you trust yourself. Freedom within connection means you stop measuring love by proximity. You stop demanding proof through sacrifice. You stop equating devotion with dependence. The healthiest relationships are not built on constant presence but on constant awareness. You know the other exists as their own world, and you are privileged, not entitled, to enter it. Turning control into creation. The urge to control comes from an energy that wants to do something. If you suppress it, it turns inward, creating anxiety, jealousy, or resentment. But if you redirect it, that same energy becomes creative force. Instead of policing someone else's freedom, you channel that intensity into building something: art, purpose, vision, mastery. You let the hunger that once devoured love become the fire that fuels your evolution. Desire's purpose was never to enslave. It was to awaken. The same force that once chained you to obsession can now forge your power. When you create, you reclaim authorship of your own passion. You realize that the energy you thought you needed from others has always been your own vitality waiting for direction. That realization is liberation disguised as love. The discipline of letting go. Freedom is not a mood. It is a discipline. It requires daily practice. the repeated choice to release what you cannot control. Letting go does not mean detachment. It means refusing to collapse when the other changes, withdraws, or grows. It means staying rooted in your own stability, trusting that love can evolve without dying. The discipline of freedom asks you to stay soft when your old defenses want to harden. It asks you to stay open even after disappointment. It demands that you keep choosing connection over control, even when fear whispers otherwise. Every time you choose release over possession, you transmute a piece of shadow into light. Desire as a teacher. Desire is not here to punish you. It is here to teach you. It teaches self-awareness, because only through wanting can you learn what you fear. It teaches surrender, because only through passion can you learn where your limits truly lie. And it teaches humility, because love reminds you that no matter how powerful you are, another soul's freedom is not yours to command. To live without desire is to live half alive. To live consumed by it is to live enslaved. But to live in balance with it, to feel deeply and still remain sovereign, is mastery. Freedom does not kill desire, it purifies it. It turns craving into reverence, attachment into devotion, need into choice. The alchemist's heart. When you practice the alchemy of freedom, something profound happens. You begin to see that the energy of possession was never about others. It was about your own evolution. Every person who stirred obsession within you was a mirror. Every heartbreak was a crucible. Every moment of control was a spark waiting to be refined into self-awareness. Through that fire, you discover a truth that changes everything. You were never meant to own another soul. You were meant to learn how to love without captivity. Love does not demand submission, it invites transformation. When you and another rise together, each remaining whole yet intertwined, you create something rare, a bond that transcends fear. That is the alchemy of freedom. Flexion 1. Identify one area in your life where desire still feels like control. 2. Ask yourself what fear hides beneath that need to hold on. 3. Channel that energy into creation, something that expresses rather than confines. When you can transform the energy of grasping into the energy of giving, you become an alchemist of the heart. Freedom, then, is no longer something you chase. It becomes the air you breathe, the natural rhythm of love purified by awareness. Chapter 11. Shadows integrated, balancing passion, autonomy, and love. Integration begins when you stop trying to divide yourself into acceptable and forbidden parts. When you stop calling your depth too much, your desire dangerous, and your need for sovereignty selfish. The shadow you fear within yourself is not your enemy. It is your teacher. It holds the power you've been too afraid to claim, and until you face it, you'll keep meeting it in others through jealousy, obsession, control, and loss. To integrate the shadow of possession, you must bring both your light and darkness to the same table. The part that wants to love completely and the part that fears annihilation through intimacy. The one that craves union and the one that fights for freedom. Integration means both voices get to speak, and neither dominates. The seduction of extremes. Human nature leans toward polarity. You either love without boundaries or build walls so high no one can enter. You either surrender fully or isolate completely. These extremes feel safer than balance because balance requires constant awareness. Extremes are simple. Balance is alive. Integration asks you to live in that tension, to let passion and autonomy coexist. To want deeply, but never disappear in that wanting. To let love soften you, without letting it dismantle you. The seduction of extremes is that they make you feel powerful, all in or all out, controlled or completely free. But real strength is not found in extremes. It's found in the still point between them where chaos and calm coexist. That still point is what makes intimacy sustainable. The mirror of the other. Every person who enters your life reflects a fragment of your inner landscape. The lover who clings shows you your fear of being left. The partner who withdraws shows you your fear of engulfment. You attract what you have not yet integrated. Instead of labeling others as toxic or unavailable, look at what they reveal within you. If you keep encountering control, maybe you haven't yet faced your own hunger for it. If you keep finding partners who vanish, maybe you still equate closeness with danger. The mirror never lies. It only repeats the lesson until it's learned. When you integrate your shadow, you stop needing relationships to act as your teacher. You can finally love people as they are, not as projections of your unresolved self. The dance between power and vulnerability. Power and vulnerability are not opposites, they are partners. Without vulnerability, power becomes tyranny. Without power, vulnerability becomes victimhood. Integration means embodying both. The strength to hold your boundaries and the softness to open your heart. Most people choose one side and call it safety. They either armor up and call it independence or surrender completely and call it love. But wholeness demands both. You can say, I love you deeply, and also say, I will not lose myself for you. You can admit, I need closeness, while still claiming I choose freedom. When both are honored, intimacy becomes truth instead of transaction. Meeting your inner possessor. Everyone carries an inner possessor, the part that wants to claim, control, and secure. Pretending it doesn't exist only makes it act from the shadows. Integration means sitting with it, listening to its fears. It says, if I don't control, I'll be abandoned. If I let go, I'll disappear. If I'm not needed, I'll be forgotten. You don't fight these voices, you comfort them. You let them know they are safe within you. You become the container they've always sought in others. When the inner possessor feels seen, it no longer hijacks your relationships. It transforms into the protector of your boundaries instead of the saboteur of your peace. The art of sacred conflict. Integrated love doesn't avoid conflict, it transforms it. Every disagreement, every tension, is a chance to refine your understanding of love. When you can express anger without cruelty, disappointment without shame, need without manipulation, you are practicing emotional mastery. Possession uses conflict to dominate. Integration uses conflict to deepen connection. You don't fight to win, you fight to understand. You don't demand submission, you invite reflection. In this way, conflict becomes sacred. It reveals where the shadow still hides. The quiet power of autonomy. Autonomy does not mean emotional distance. It means ownership of your energy. When you are autonomous, you don't expect others to regulate your self-worth. You don't need constant validation to feel secure. You can love fiercely without becoming dependent on approval. Autonomy allows you to love as a choice, not a compulsion. It lets you walk beside someone, not behind or ahead of them. Possession fears autonomy because it believes distance equals disconnection. But in truth, autonomy is the only way to sustain intimacy. Without it, love collapses under the weight of expectation. When both people are self-possessed, they create space for authentic meeting, two sovereign beings choosing each other freely, again and again. Shadow transformed into strength. Once you've faced your inner darkness, it stops controlling you. The jealousy that once consumed you becomes discernment. The possessiveness that once suffocated becomes commitment. The fear of loss becomes appreciation for impermanence. You realize that love was never supposed to make you feel safe. It was supposed to make you real. Your shadow becomes your compass, guiding you toward deeper truth. Every part of you that once felt unworthy or ashamed transforms into power through acceptance. This is how darkness becomes wisdom, through integration, not denial. When love evolves into conscious union is not two halves completing each other. It is two wholes meeting in alignment. Such relationships are rare because they require both people to know their own shadows. They require honesty that can withstand discomfort, and courage that can hold space for imperfection. When both partners are integrated, love stops being a battlefield. It becomes a forge. Each encounter sharpens your awareness, deepens your humility, and strengthens your compassion. You stop needing to win. You start needing to grow. That is how love turns from possession into partnership. Integration is a lifelong practice. You don't integrate your shadow once. You do it daily. Every moment of jealousy, every urge to control, every fear of loss is another chance to practice awareness. You breathe through it. You remind yourself, I can love without ownership. I can want without attachment. I can be powerful and tender in the same breath. This is how mastery feels, not detached, not dominant, but quietly unshakable. Integration gives you peace that no one else can grant or take away. Reflection. 1. Identify one emotion you've labeled as wrong or too much. How might it hold wisdom instead of danger? 2. When conflict arises, can you respond with both truth and grace? 3. Practice holding dual awareness, your love for another and your loyalty to yourself. Integration is not about perfection, it's about wholeness. When you no longer fear your shadow, you no longer fear intimacy. You can love fully and still remain free. Chapter 12. Sovereign connection. Living with freedom, love, and balance. Freedom, when first tasted after years of control, feels almost foreign. It is not a loud celebration. It is quiet, achingly quiet. The silence that follows liberation can be unsettling because, for so long, the noise of control filled every corner of your mind. It told you what to feel, how to act, who to be. When it leaves, the emptiness it once occupied echoes like a hollow room after a storm. But that echo, if you dare to sit with it, is the sound of sovereignty awakening. Sovereign connection begins where obsession dies. It is born not from dominance or dependency, but from the sacred meeting point between autonomy and love. To live in this space is to know your power without needing to wield it against another. It is to love without fear of loss, to trust without surrendering your boundaries, and to exist fully without consuming or being consumed. For some, that kind of connection feels impossible, like asking fire not to burn or water not to drown. But what if the truth is simpler? What if you were never meant to extinguish your fire, only to learn how to contain it? The goal is not to become less passionate, less intense, or less devoted. It is to become more conscious, more discerning, more deliberate about where that intensity goes. You can want deeply without needing to possess. You can love fiercely without devouring. You can give your all without disappearing inside someone else's shadow. That is the paradox of sovereignty. It does not numb your emotions. It sharpens them. It does not detach you from love. It refines the way you express it. True sovereignty is not isolation. It is not a cold wall built from old wounds or a refusal to let anyone close. Those who equate freedom with distance misunderstand its nature. Real freedom does not come from pushing others away. It comes from knowing that even in closeness, you remain whole. When you walk into a relationship as a sovereign being, you are no longer searching for completion. You are sharing abundance. You no longer say, I need you to make me feel safe, but rather, I am safe within myself and I choose to share this peace with you. That shift changes everything. Love becomes lighter, not weaker. Desire becomes purer, not colder. Loyalty becomes a choice, not an obligation. To live in sovereign connection is to understand that two whole beings can meet without merging into a single identity. They can share energy without draining each other. They can dance in rhythm without chains. But this level of connection demands a maturity that only comes through the ashes of control. You cannot fake it. You cannot perform it. You must have walked through the labyrinth of possession to understand the cost of losing yourself. You must have tasted obsession to appreciate balance. You must have broken your own heart through control to realize that love was never meant to be owned. Sovereignty is not the absence of vulnerability. It is its highest form. Because to love as a sovereign being, you must stand naked before another without armor, without manipulation, without pretense. You must say, here I am, whole and unguarded. I do not need you to save me, nor do I intend to save you. I only wish to meet you here as equals. This kind of love dismantles ego. It dissolves the need to win, to dominate, to always be right. It transforms the relationship into a shared temple of growth rather than a battlefield of control. In this temple, accountability replaces blame. Curiosity replaces judgment. Boundaries are no longer barriers. They are invitations to meet one another with respect. And yet this kind of connection requires constant awareness. It is easy to slip back into old habits, to mistake devotion for dependency, to confuse passion with possession. The moment fear enters, the impulse to control awakens. The moment insecurity whispers, the need to dominate returns. That is why sovereign love is a daily practice, not a destination. It requires you to check your intentions constantly. Am I acting from love or fear? Am I offering or demanding? Am I expanding or restricting? When you live from that awareness, your relationships evolve beyond the games of the past. You stop keeping score. You stop needing constant reassurance. You stop punishing silence or demanding proof of loyalty. Instead, you build trust through consistency and compassion, not control. Freedom in love is not reckless. It is deeply responsible. It honors the weight of emotional intimacy while protecting the space each person needs to grow. It asks, can I love you and still allow you to change? Can I desire you without clinging? Can I stay connected while letting you go when you need to breathe? If the answer is yes, then you are living from sovereignty. It does not mean you will never feel fear or jealousy again. It means you will not let those emotions drive you. You will acknowledge them, tend to them, but never let them dictate your choices. That is mastery, the power to feel without being ruled by what you feel. In sovereign love, silence becomes sacred instead of threatening. Distance becomes a space for renewal, not rejection. Autonomy becomes a shared value, not a sign of detachment. When both people in a relationship operate from sovereignty, they create an energy field where growth is inevitable. The relationship itself becomes a living organism, breathing, evolving, teaching. It does not demand sameness. It celebrates contrast. It does not shrink to fit comfort. It expands to accommodate truth. Still, freedom must coexist with accountability. Sovereignty does not mean you get to walk away from consequences. It means you take full responsibility for your words, your energy, and your impact. You no longer manipulate outcomes or hide behind emotional defense. You face the mirror and say, I chose this, I created this, and I can change it. That ownership is what separates sovereignty from selfishness. Selfishness takes without giving. Sovereignty gives from fullness. To live sovereignly is to stop expecting others to regulate your emotions. It is to stop making someone else responsible for your peace, your happiness, your stability. You reclaim those powers one by one, like retrieving sacred relics stolen by fear. Once you do, no one can truly possess you again. Not because you have walls, but because you have roots. The truth is, freedom without love is hollow, but love without freedom is suffocating. The art of life is to hold both: open palms, steady heart, grounded soul. Some will misunderstand your peace. They will call your detachment cold or your calmness unfeeling. Let them. They have not yet learned that stillness can burn brighter than obsession. The person who no longer needs to control is the most powerful one in the room, because power, when purified, becomes presence. It no longer demands attention. It commands it silently. And this silence, this quiet strength, becomes magnetic in ways control never could be. It draws people not through fear, but through authenticity. In sovereign connection, love is no longer about what you can take, but what you can create together. It becomes a partnership of evolution, where each person mirrors the other's potential instead of their wounds. That is the kind of love that endures. Not the one built on fear, dependency, or control, but the one built on awareness, truth, and reverence for each other's freedom. At the end of this journey, you might find that sovereignty was never about separation at all. It was about union, between your own inner power and your capacity to love. When you integrate both, you stop chasing control and start embodying it, not as force but as grace. You move through the world with quiet authority, unshakable in your boundaries and infinite in your compassion. You can stand alone and still feel connected. You can surrender and still remain powerful, because the ultimate freedom is not escaping love. It is loving without losing yourself. So breathe. Stand tall. Let go of the need to own, to prove, to dominate. You have nothing to protect anymore, because what's truly yours cannot be taken. Your heart is sovereign. Your love is sacred. And when you live from that truth, Every connection you touch becomes a reflection of your own liberation.